Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farooq Betafi. This week we are focusing more on what is going on in Kashmir, especially because India seems to have done it again. India has been usurping the rights of Kashmiri people for quite some time, but now they have come up with an idea to abrogate Article 370 and 35A of their own constitution, which, mind you, was controversial in itself from the very start. But even when you look at it, what is happening today, the method in which it has been done, you are deciding the future of a people without consulting them, actually holding them in a lockdown. At this moment, entire Kashmiri people that actually live in the regions controlled by India are under house arrest. And we are going to talk about that as well. And interestingly, while Pakistan doesn't recognize the accession deed, or for that matter, Article 370, what you have to remember is they all happened before Shimla Agreement was signed, and Shimla Agreement says that neither side will be able to change the status of a region under their control. We are going to talk about these matters and more. In order to discuss these matters, we have the most pertinent expert, politician, leader at this moment in the program. We are joined by Sardar Masood Khan Sahab, who is president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, also a career diplomat, writes also beautifully. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let us talk first about Article 370 and 35A, the way India has actually handled it. How big a deal it is?
Well, the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the people of Pakistan never recognized Article 370 as legitimate. But let me go back into history. And in 1947 and thereafter, this was a Faustian pact between pro-India political parties or political elements and the Indian government sitting in Delhi at that time. This deal was brokered by the Viceroy of India, and India occupied the territory. And they assured Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, who was a populist and popular leader at that time, and Kashmiris were in fact mesmerized by his charisma, and he chose the wrong side. He chose to trust the Indian government at that time, and they assured him that, well, you are our prime minister, and this state, this occupied territory, would be in fact an autonomous state, and you will have a president, and you will have all the trappings of a sovereign state, and you just surrendering three things to the federation or to the union, and these were the external affairs, defense, and communications. So this was kind of a lollipop to the pro-India elements, the political elements in Kashmir which were inclined towards India. But there was another stream in politics, and that was pro-Pakistan, a very strong, robust pro-Pakistan backing for accession to Pakistan. Right. Let me tell you that our leader was Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas at that time, who was incarcerated in 1947. Right. And there was Sardar Muhammad Ibrahim, who was the founder president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. It was on, in his residence on 19th of July 1947 that the people of Jammu and Kashmir, under the leadership of all Jammu and Kashmir Muslim Conference, decided that they wanted to accede to Pakistan. This was almost a month before the creation of Pakistan. So this will of the Kashmiri people was repulsed and frustrated, first by occupation of the territory, an armed occupation, and second, this instrument of linking India to the state. What happened over the years, that this article was in any case eviscerated. It was turned into an empty shell, because after agreeing to this article, the Indian government would issue these presidential decrees from Delhi, and made this redundant, but it had its symbolic value. It was India's recognition of the autonomous status of the territory. So you asking how big this deal is, how big a deal this is. Let me tell you that this was a big deal for pro-India elements, pro-India parties like the National Conference, like the People's Democratic Party, like the elements in the Congress Party and political activists in or the BJP, who had trusted Delhi and India.
And they have been betrayed now.
They have been betrayed. As far as the people of Jammu and Kashmir are concerned, the bigger reality is occupation of the territory for the past 72 years. And this unrelenting repression against them, this constant brutalization of the Kashmiri people, and this campaign to make them aliens in their own homeland. That is the bigger reality. So for them, nothing has changed. But let me refer to another article. And I can pause if you're about to ask me a question about the Article 35A.
Go ahead.
What I want to tell you is that this Article 35A was no gift of India to the people of Kashmir. In fact, this deal was recognized, or this status was recognized
in 1950s, right?
No. This was it predates 1947. It dates back to 1927. In fact, it was in that year that the Maharaja Kashmir had declared that the Kashmiris, the original inhabitants of the territory, would have permanent residence, and nobody would be able to buy property from India or elsewhere, and this was the exclusive right of the Kashmiris. Of course, they were also given an exclusive privilege in regard to employment in the public sector and enrollment in government colleges or government-run institutions. So that has been taken away from the people of Jammu and Kashmir. This was their inherent, inalienable right, and they have been robbed of this right.
Through this shenanigan, right?
Yes.
And I'm glad that now you are talking about Article 35A, because there has been a lot of talk about changing the demography of the Kashmir Valley. There have been talks in the past that it was the bulwark against changing the constitution of the social constitution of the region. And now India will be able to bring its own investors, one. B, also retired soldiers, Hindu soldiers from outside Kashmir, to change the complexion of the valley. How is this fear legitimate now?
It is real and it's legitimate. In fact, the Indian government has been planning to take a series of measures. As you have already mentioned, that investors, entrepreneurs from India would be coming to the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And they would be buying properties, they would be buying land, land would be leased to them. Then, of course, they have planned that Indians from adjoining states or even areas as far as Kerala and Bengal would be coming, and they would be settled inside Kashmir, because they would be able to purchase properties. Ordinary citizens would be able to purchase properties. And they want to settle them. There would be, of course, the Pandit colonies and the former armed personnel colonies called Sainik colonies, but they are also planning these settlements on the lines of the settlements in Palestine, occupied Palestinian territory in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. So they want to replicate that kind of occupation here.
They are going to change the number of population. And now maybe the majority changes to Hindus rather than Muslims? Is that a possibility?
That's what they're planning to do. Let me tell you that if I take you back to 1947, the population of Muslims in Jammu was 61%. Today it is 33%. In November 1947, the Hindus there, the Maharaja, the Indian National Army, and Rashtriya Swayamsevak, they conspired and they massacred about 237 Kashmiri Muslims and pushed some 500,000 Muslims to Pakistan as refugees. So that was the first Holocaust after the Holocaust of the Second World War. Now, that's how they managed to reduce the Muslim population in Jammu. Now they are looking at the Valley of Kashmir.
Right.
And if there are illegal settlements there, after occupation, after colonization, then of course they would reduce the number of Muslims in the Valley of Kashmir.
Right.
Now, these are not the only steps. You know, there are other steps. For instance, there are hundreds of thousands of West Pakistan refugees, so-called West Pakistan refugees, dating back to 1947, or refugees from Azad Kashmir territory, who should have gone, as a matter of fact, I mean, bulk of them should have gone to Punjab or to some other states, but they pushed them into Kashmir deliberately, into the Kashmir territory deliberately. They're going to give them permanent resident status and all other privileges. So, and they are also doing an exercise of fresh delimitation of the electoral constituencies, so that they can reduce Muslim majority into minority in those constituencies. So it's a very comprehensive plan.
Right, sir.
Yes.
You mentioned two examples. One is Israel. The other is Germany, Nazi Germany. Israel never actually called Palestinian people its own. But when you look at how India keeps on treating Kashmiris, it seems that it calls them their own, and yet it behaves like Hitler, right? Nazis. So at this moment, do you think that there are similarities between what was happening to the Jewish population of Germany and what is happening to Kashmiris?
This is exactly what is happening. I mean, if you go back to the interwar period of the last century, you know, the world was appeasing Germany while there was this rise of fascism, and there was this rise of extremism in Italy. So the world was appeasing them, and they had to pay a heavy price for that. Now, India is also acting as a fascist. It is also an imperialist. I mean, it is turning its occupation of the Indian occupied Kashmir into colonization. It is establishing a colony there. We thought that the era of colonialism had come to an end, but India is setting a new example of foreign occupation and alien domination in the Indian occupied territory.
Right.
So yes, absolutely. I mean, there are similarities, and this extremist Hindu philosophy called Hindutva, this is an attempt to incite hatred against Muslims, to demonize them, to othering of Muslims, in fact, to the othering of Muslims as if they are aliens. And so there are similarities, definitely, and they also want to replicate what Israel is doing already in the
Mr. President,
Palestinian
as we
territory.
move forward in the program, we are going to come back to the RSS philosophy as well, which is very important. But right now, since they have taken these measures, I want to ask you about the attempt to bifurcate the Jammu and Kashmir territory into Ladakh, and actually making it a part of union territories without representation, and also then trying to absorb the Kashmiri side. How do you see this move? What exactly actually was behind it?
India is trying to communalize the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir, or the occupied part of it. We treated the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir as one entity with 5 regions in it: Azad Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, Ladakh, the Valley of Kashmir, and Jammu. But they are separating them on communal lines, and so that they can dilute the influence of the Muslims in the Valley of Kashmir, in Jammu and in Ladakh. The other thing is to weaken these states. I mean, because they have declared Ladakh a separate union territory and Jammu and Kashmir as a separate union territory, which means that they would not even be provinces. They've been downgraded. So this is the intention. This is again an extension of Hindutva, and this is that tide of hatred against Muslims and threat to their existence, which is being demonstrated.
Right. When so much is happening, especially when you are seeing it as ethnic or racial cleansing or religious cleansing, and Indian government keeps on doing these things, these ghastly things, why is it that the world doesn't see them? Please.
Well, basically, in the past 24 hours or 48 hours, if you look at the world press, they have protested and they have warned India that it is a very perilous step that it has taken, that it would have a very negative impact on peace and security in South Asia. But these are the newspapers or some odd political parties of a state. For instance, the Labour Party of the United Kingdom has issued a statement, and then this all-party parliamentary Kashmir group in the British Parliament, which has a membership of 76 members. Their chairperson has written to the United Nations Secretary General protesting against this move and has asked the United Nations to intervene. But by and large, the governments are silent and tight-lipped about it because their strategic or economic interests are tied with India. And that's why they choose not to speak up. We should not be disappointed because the peaceful movement for the realization of the right to self-determination is robust. It is at its peak, and that's why India wants to crush it. But it would succeed. I mean, this kind of imperialism would not succeed. India fails to recognize this existential reality, which is defined by the will and resilience of the Kashmiri movement.
Absolutely.
So,
regarding the rights violations, because they keep on happening, and we have seen in this program, you have already in the past told me how much violence there is. Children have been blinded, other people have been maimed or killed. In that situation, I have to ask you one thing that is more to do with your past experience than your current office as a diplomat. I have to ask you, how relevant is human rights in international politics? Because the Western countries that actually profess democratic values keep on reminding us that human rights are important. Here is a glaring example of violations. So they shouldn't actually see it then? They shouldn't be actually talking about it then?
we thought that the New World Order was anchored in human rights, and that human rights were universal. I mean, they had to be respected all over the world. But unfortunately, there are double standards. I mean, there's a set of rules or standards that is applied to the Western countries and another for occupied territories, particularly occupied territories of the Muslim countries where Muslim populations are involved. So I would say that yes, the liberal order is also on the retreat. In fact, ethnic nationalism is on the rise, and against that backdrop, I think that probably those people calling for respect for human rights are on the wrong side of history. I mean, ordinarily when there would be such massive killings or blindings or torture or enforced disappearances or arbitrary arrests or these discovery of mass graves or use of rape as an instrument of war, there would be condemnation. But there's no condemnation in the world forums. We saw this report, which was published by the High Commissioner for Human Rights last year, and a follow-up report was released this year, which substantiated, in fact, that India was committing these crimes against humanity and human rights violations. But then the Human Rights Council did not implement the recommendations of this report, the reports of the Human Rights Chief. And what were the recommendations? They said that establish a commission of inquiry which should go to the region, particularly to the IOK, and to ascertain conditions objectively there, through first-hand monitoring. But they were not allowed to do that, and the Human Rights Council has not taken that first step. But it is significant that such reports were being published, and this was one of the factors that India wanted to close this, or to put an end to this kind of build-up, diplomatic build-up around the issue of Jammu and Kashmir.
Right. We are going to talk about human rights further in the program, but let us take a quick break. Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were talking about Kashmir. We have the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir in the program. I'm going to go back to him. Sir, we still are talking about human rights violations. And you said that the liberal world order is on retreat. But with due respect, we have seen similar kind of lack of response on such violations in past 15, 20 years when liberal order was quite assertive. Is it, does it have anything to do with the duplicity of international order that when it comes to violations in, say, Syria or Venezuela, they matter, and when it comes to what is happening in Kashmir, it doesn't?
Yes, I talked about double standards. There are double standards, and they've been there for decades. This drift away from unified approach has become very evident in the recent past particularly, and Kashmir and Palestine are the victims. We understand that. But I think that still there are people in the Western countries who are the leaders of the human rights movement and elsewhere who care for human rights, because these are fundamental rights of people and they are intrinsic to human existence, and protected and promoted by Islam also.
Right. Let us now talk about another matter, that is how should Pakistan respond? Earlier in the program you have already said that Pakistan never acknowledged Article 370 or 35A for that matter, especially in the current form. But Shimla Agreement actually states, third point, that both sides will not unilaterally alter the status or the circumstances of the territories under their control. It has been changed. Should Pakistan be responding and taking it to the UNSC, focusing on this matter, or should Pakistan actually merely focus on the human rights angle?
If we are looking for keystone documents in regard to Kashmir, we'll have to refer to the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Between 1948 and 1957, several resolutions were passed which mandated that the popular will of the people of Jammu and Kashmir would be ascertained through a democratic method by holding a plebiscite, and that recognizes three parties to the dispute: Pakistan, India, and the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So what India has done today is that it has tried to alter the disputed status of the Jammu and Kashmir territory, or the occupied part of the Jammu and Kashmir territory, and this is a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, international law, and as far as this Article 370 was concerned, it was a thin veneer of autonomy. This was Kashmiris, pro-India Kashmiris were coaxed into believing that they had a separate identity and they had some semblance of autonomy. But now India has imposed its naked imperialism and colonialism on the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So, but this Article 35A is a different matter altogether. As I mentioned, that this was not a gift by the government of India to the people of Kashmir. This right or recognition of these rights, these set of rights, dates back to 1927. And in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, we have the state subject law, and it did not need any particular law which you had to adopt. So I would say that the real robbery of the rights has been in case of the repeal and revocation of Article 35 of the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution had only recognized the rights that the people of Jammu and Kashmir were already enjoying. Now this, what they have done now, they have pilfered these rights. They have taken away these rights away from the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Sir, I see your point regarding Article 35A, but the problem with Article 370 is the way it has been managed or changed is so tempting that it is out and open and in total breach of their own constitution, that one could have actually agitated this point as well. Somehow our own restrictions, our own point of view limits us from exploiting that. Is it not important that we see that Article 370, Clause 3 actually states that without the permission of Constituent Assembly, which ceased to exist in 1950s, this law cannot be amended, and then they had to actually amend Article 367, and again, very technically so, and then the government there is also not representative of the people, it is of the center. So why not actually, if government of Pakistan or government of Kashmir cannot do it, shouldn't anybody be actually going to the Indian courts or international courts and highlighting this matter?
People have gone to the Indian courts, and they have also gone to, they intend to go to the international courts or ICJ. In fact, I mean, these ideas have been floated and suggestions have been made. But let me tell you that we need not hold a discourse on Article 370 because if we defend Article 370 or express concern about the abolition of this article, inadvertently, indirectly, we are in fact defending or rationalizing the Indian regime of deceit and dissimulation.
Right.
This was a deception towards the Indian Kashmiri loyalists in Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, the Kashmiris or Kashmiri political parties or entities which are loyal to India.
Right.
But what we can say is that India, through these steps, has tried to alter, unsuccessfully I would say, the disputed nature of the Indian occupied territory, and the disputed status of the territory is recognized by the United Nations, and it is protected under international law. Sure. And we were earlier referring to these reports by the High Commissioner for Human Rights. In both these reports, I mean, the report released last year and the follow-up report this year, categorically say that India should respect the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, which is protected under international law, which has a protection of international law. Right. So this is a violation of the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, right, an attempt to violate the right to self-determination of...
Will you say that India has been actually claiming for quite some time that it is the world's largest democracy and that it is a constitutional democracy, it believes in institutions, when it actually violates the spirit of its own constitution? Do you think that it still can be called a democracy?
Some people have called it shemocracy or hypocrisy, and other words have been used for Indian democracy. But what we see right now is a fascist democracy, an extremist democracy, a democracy driven by Hindu extremism and violent extremism.
Like Nazis, a democracy for only few.
Yes.
Not
yes,
for all the people.
Absolutely. So it's a racist policy anchored in religious extremism, and we condemn it.
Now, before we talk about this ideology, because we have to actually deconstruct that as well, I want to bring in another matter so that then we can discuss ICJ. One aspect that even before this measure we saw, India using cluster bombs and targeting population on this side of LOC or Kashmir, across LOC, where they have been using cluster bombs and people have been injured. It seems to be a clear violation of Geneva Convention, international codes. Should Pakistan view it as such a violation and take it internationally?
It can be taken up internationally. I think it has been communicated to the United Nations Security Council and the UN Secretary General by our Foreign Minister, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. There are other forums like the International Committee of the Red Cross and other entities that deal with international humanitarian law. It is, the use of these cluster munitions is a violation of the International Convention on cluster munitions, ban on the use of cluster munitions. So people across the line of control, as a result of the use of this deadly weapon, have been killed and injured, and children have been killed, as a matter of fact, because they thought that these were toys, these bomblets were toys. So, but here what I want to underline is that India doesn't respect the rule of law internationally. It believes in might is right. It believes in imperialism. It believes in state terrorism, and it is targeting the people of Jammu and Kashmir through this doctrine. Recently one of the leaders, one of the former BJP ministers, Yashwant Sinha, had said that he had talked to a member of the core of the cabinet of the BJP, or core cabinet, and he'd informed him that as far as Jammu and Kashmir was concerned, the Indian occupied territory was concerned, the only doctrine that they followed was the doctrine of force.
Right.
Brute force.
And that is quite visible also.
Yes.
Now, sir, let us combine the two issues. One is this international violation of codes and conduct, and the other is what India has done recently to Kashmir, right? Can Pakistan take both these matters to ICJ, given that India is not going to accept the jurisdiction of the court?
It is for the Foreign Office to reflect on this and consult all stakeholders. There's something called lawfare in addition to diplomacy that you, and this is diplomacy plus, I would say that what you do is that you go to the legal forums or to the courts to either clarify or seek justice on certain issues. So I think that option is open to Pakistan because recently India, in regard to the case of Kulbhushan Yadav, went to the ICJ and there was a verdict given by the court. So we can also go there, not to take the issue of Jammu and Kashmir to the court, because the UN's dispensation or decision is already there, enshrined in the United Nations Security Council resolutions. So you don't have to revisit them. Only the Security Council will have the authority to interpret them or to move further on those resolutions, to follow up on those resolutions. We should not go to the ICJ for the settlement of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. It has to be decided by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They have to exercise their will. But on these issues, for instance, violations, and particularly a repeal of Article 35A, what India has practically done is that it has expressed its intent to establish a colony there. And let me tell you that this illicit transfer of population in an occupied territory or in a conflict zone is a violation of Articles 27 and 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention, its additional Protocol 1, and the ICC statute, several Security Council resolutions, and several reports and recommendations of the special rapporteurs on this subject. So when you deport people or transfer population from outside to the conflict zone or to an occupied territory, it is a gross violation of international humanitarian law, and this is precisely what India is intending to do, planning to do. And therefore, we have every right to go to any court court, and probably the International Court of Justice is the most appropriate court for that purpose.
Yeah, but will India recognize the jurisdiction of the court over the matter?
Well, let's not speculate about that, because there are two hypotheticals here. First is that we are going to the court, and I said that the Foreign Office or the state of Pakistan has to make a decision. Right. And second, if they do, we do not know how India would react.
Right. Regarding the Hindutva ideology, because that seems to be changing the body politic not only of Kashmir, but it is also affecting the social fabric of India itself. How India sees itself, how it treats its subjects or citizens. How do you think it is going to affect India in the short term and medium term?
You see, right now there's this war hysteria against Pakistan. There's this frenzy which India and particularly these Hindutva forces, they continue to whip up against Pakistan, against Muslims, Muslims in India itself, against Kashmiris. So they are starting off a clash between civilizations, a clash between two religions, because they are proud of Hindu majoritarianism and they think that they can take on the Muslims and defeat them. So they have that kind of madness which is driving them. So what I want to highlight is that this extremism, this violent extremism, this tide of hatred against Muslims, the attempt to marginalize Muslims and to target them and to persecute them, this is going to disrupt the entire social fabric and the political configuration of South Asia. It will have far-reaching consequences. And let me also tell you that this campaign targets Pakistan as enemy and Kashmiris and Muslims, and India by snatching this identity from the Kashmiris has launched a long war which would probably span centuries.
Right.
Because there's already resistance from Kashmir, there would be resistance from Pakistan, and there would be resistance in the Muslim community all around the world, or the Ummah, and gradually throughout the international community.
Right, sir. I'm told that we have run out of time. Mr. President, thank you very much for your time, sir. Viewers, you have listened to the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. There are many issues that need to be highlighted here. And he has very kindly highlighted all of them. But regarding this parallel between Nazis and India's Hindutva government, it is very relevant because you have to see the total disregard for human rights in the country or the territories under its control or usurped by the country. Not only that, those who say that Hitler was defeated in the end, you have to realize that he did so after destroying a lot of countries, a lot of lives. Is it a risk that we can run right now? Can we really risk it? Letting somebody become the monster it is and then destroy so many lives. This is something that we have to reflect on. Right now, Indian government seems not ready to correct its course, and the world community also seems to be oblivious to the heinous crimes that are going on. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching us. Take care.